Hi, I'm Jessica Besson, Mercer County Extension Agent for Horticulture. I'm here today to talk to you about growing strawberries in your own backyard. We'll go over everything from ordering your strawberries, selecting the type of cultivars, planting, harvesting, and what you should do after your season is over. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing we have here is just a picture of a strawberry plant. Just to point out some terminology that you may see when ordering plants or if you're doing any more research on them. So we can see they have a bit of shallow roots right here. There's the crown of the plant, which is kind of a compressed, modified stem, and that's where we're going to have our berries been produced and come out of on their branches, the leaves of the plant, and then we have what we call runners or the stolon. So this is how they propagate themselves. This originally arises from the buds of the crown there, and they grow out from the plant. And as the nodes on these stolons hit the ground, that's when they produce another plant. So we have our mother plant here, and this produces our daughter plants. So the first thing we want to think about after deciding that we want to grow strawberries is our site selection. So air drainage is very important with many of our fruiting crops. So we want high elevations, this will allow movement of heavier air away from the plant on cold spring nights, a moderate slope, and then we want to avoid those south facing slopes as well. And then we also have the internal soil drainage. So this is going to be more for like when it rains. So we want to make sure there's no soil compaction, that it's not a place that's going to be really lots of clay, which I know can be hard sometimes to avoid, but we want to try to find something that has good mulch, high or in organic matter to make good soil drainage occur. So the next thing to think about with site prep is to avoid sites that grew solanaceous crops in the prior 3 years. So we're going to try to avoid the solanaceous crops because they might have had psyllium wilt, and that can be passed on to our strawberries, which we want to avoid. We also need to think about, are we going to do plastic culture versus matted row? So if you're a homeowner, you're most likely going to do a matted row, which you see there on the right. That's the traditional way we think about strawberries being planted. More commercial producers, maybe farmers market producers, will often do plastic culture. So with plastic culture, these are actually treated as annual crops. So they plant them later in the fall and they get berries off of them that first spring, but then they rip them out. So you don't get them multiple years. The matted row, though, is going to be more of a perennial crop, and you'll get several years out of that one. We also want to find a location where they get at least 6 hours of sunlight, and you want to make sure it's close to an irrigation source. So they like about an average of an inch of water per week. Be close to an irrigation source because it's going to be important. You're going to be more likely to water them if you're close by with water, and especially if we get in a drought, kind of like we did at the end of last summer, you'll be able to give them water that'll help get them through the winter months, and hopefully you'll have better yields in the spring. So the next step is prepping the soil. So preparation is very important because one of the biggest issues that we have with strawberry production is weeds. So if you have an area you're thinking about and you notice there's a lot of perennial weeds that come back every year in an area that's really tough to get the weeds down, you may want to consider a different location because that's one of the biggest battles. So I would look for a location that is not so weedy or something that you can get those weeds under control. We recommend doing a soil test through the extension office. This way we can tell you exactly what your soil needs and you won't over fertilize or under fertilize, and this can also help you save some money in the long run as well. Now that we have our site picked out, we know what we need to do to prep for planting strawberries, we need to pick out the right cultivar. So we have three different types of strawberries we can pick from: June bearing, everbearing, and day neutral. So June bearing are going to be the ones that we traditionally think of when there are strawberries that are ready to pick in May, when they see these big you pick strawberry patches. They produce a large crop over a course of 3 to 4 weeks at a time. So just in that one time frame during the beginning of the early summer. The everbearing ones and day neutral ones will produce over a longer period of time. The day neutral are unaffected by day length when they produce. They tend to be a little finicky though. They they can initiate flower buds under any day length condition, and they will continue to form flower buds as long as the temperatures are not too hot or too cold. So you can potentially get multiple pickings off of these, but at the same time, you're probably going to have smaller berry size, and it all depends on how the weather goes. If we get too dry or too hot, they won't produce as well. So traditionally, we see a lot of people growing the June bearing types of berries, and you can see on this slide there's a few names of these varieties like Early Girl, Red Chief, All Star, and then I have some on there for the Everbearing as well. So when ordering your plant material, they're going to come in the mail and they're going to be dormant. So they're not going to have all those bright green leaves on them. They're going to be just a little ball of roots sometimes. Sometimes they'll have a couple leaves on them. You want to make sure to order from a reputable nursery. Better if the nursery grows the plants themselves, because cheap plants are not always cheap. When I say that, you can find some cheap plants maybe later in the season, but then you plant them and you may end up later having disease issues, or you may have to irrigate more, or a couple of other things could happen and you could eventually just lose your money on them. So make sure you get them from a good grower. Order early, ask about your delivery time. A lot of times if you wait until actual May when people are having berries and you decide you want them, it's a little too late in the season to order them. And make sure you inspect them upon arrival. Make sure to look at the roots really well. Make sure nothing appears to be rotted or things have not been packaged the correct way. When your plant material comes finally in the mail and you can't plant immediately, so maybe it's started to rain for a couple of days or the temperatures have gotten really cold, there's a few options for you. So if you're not going to be able to plant for at least 2 to 3 days, just spray the plants with some water and keep them cool in a sheltered place. If it will be longer than 3 days, think about hilling in the plants. So hilling in means to dig a well-drained trench to contain the plant, place the plant singly in the trench, and cover the roots with soil. You can also keep them in a refrigerator. Both temperatures have to be above freezing, which most of our refrigerators are anyways, but at the same time, you want to make sure you don't have any other fruits and vegetables in that fridge. So maybe you have an extra fridge that you have like outside in your garage or something. Because the ethylene produced by some of the other plant fruits and vegetables can inhibit the strawberry growth once you plant them. So if you are able to plant as soon as you get your plants in the mail or however you get them, uh, make sure to keep those roots moist while planting. Plant by hand, or some people have used setters, I believe using old tobacco setters to plant. These guys are self-pollinated, but they do need insects to help them with pollination. Uh, so you don't have to worry about having a pollinator planted out in the field with them, but bees definitely help. When it comes to spacing, the June bearing ones, you want to plant them about 18 to 30 inches apart in rows 3 to 4 feet apart. And the everbearing, or those day neutral ones, 1 foot apart in a row, and rows 1 foot apart as well. Planting care once they're in the ground for June bearing berries. Uh, Bloom removal is important for the first season with matted rows. This will allow our plants to get larger and produce more berries that second year of growth. We want to make sure to cultivate between the rows. Runners will root easier once those rows have been in between have been cultivated. Trim back any late forming runners, so ones that form late in the fall, because they're just not going to be as productive as the ones that we want to form earlier. With Everbearing, remove the flowers until the end of June, and runners are all removed. Everything has been planted in the ground, we've removed blooms. So what do we really need to do for this first year of care? We really need to make sure we clean out any weeds that come up. We need to irrigate, especially in the fall, to have successful plants make it through the winter into the spring. And we want to mulch. So we're going to get ready to go through about mulching. So why is mulch so important? Well, it protects blooms from spring frosts. It reduces that weed growth. Like I said, that's one of the most annoying things with growing strawberries. It helps conserve moisture. It will keep your fruit clean. Um, you can use clean wheat, oat, or rye straw to put down as a mulch. You want to avoid grass clippings because they can become matted. You also want to avoid using hay. A lot of times people get a little confused between straw and hay, but if you put hay down, you risk adding more weed seed back into your soil around your plants. So mulch is usually applied when temperatures begin falling towards the 20s. This should be about in December here in Kentucky. You need to be able to see a few leaves poking up through the mulch, or the plants may be smothered. So about 3 to 4 inches deep, because we don't want to smother them and potentially harm our plants while we're trying to protect them at the same time. In the spring, pull mulch away from the plants. Usually happens when we see new growth start to occur. The leaves start popping up a little through the mulch. They might be a little bit of a yellow color. If afraid of a late frost, have a good plan in mind. So, maybe you rake back that mulch, but it's still there in between the rows, and so you can easily rake it back over. Or maybe you've got a piece of remake cloth, we call it, or like tobacco canvas cloth ready to go and pull over your plants if you need to. And another indicator is to when to remove your mulch if you're not seeing your little plants pop up a lot is when the red maples begin to bud or the forsythia begins to bloom. But just keep in mind to watch the temperatures and the forecast for any potential frost. So frost protection is important because the first flowers to bloom will end up producing your largest fruit. And everyone wants a really large strawberry, right? So flower buds lose their hardiness as they develop and become more prone to frost injury. So that's why it's important for us to try to protect them from frost injury. And you can see in that picture there, those blooms where the centers are dark, those flowers, that's frost injury on those flowers. So those berries will not develop properly. Some growers like to use water that they keep a sprinkler on over top their plants, and as the water freezes it releases heat and maintains the temperature at 32 degrees where it does, that's right at freezing, and it helps protect those plants. Strawberries do come with some insects and diseases. We do experience fruit rots, leaf spots, but there's some cultural controls for that. There are spider mites. We have spotted winged Drosophila, the fruit fly. Most of our strawberries escape that pest, but if you're doing those everbearing ones or day neutral ones where you have a potential crop in the fall, you will probably end up seeing some damage from spotted winged Drosophila. But thankfully, most of all of our June berries miss that. You can see on this slide here are some examples from one of our IPM scouting guides for strawberries, how we have spray schedules for organic ones and non-organic pesticides to be used. So we can see the plant stage, we have it there, and what insects and diseases may be affecting it, and the time of year that these pests are a problem. And then at the bottom, that table 3, we have a list of beneficial insects that are a good thing to find out in our strawberry fields as well. And that one that's in the picture right there on the right, that's a green lacewing. So that's one that's good for getting some of those mites that I mentioned in the last slide. As I mentioned on the last slide, we have this IPM scouting guide for common problems of strawberry in Kentucky. I just wanted to put this image up here of what it looks like, and this is easy to find online. It's an ID 238. And that is easy to find, and we also, if you'd like a copy of one, we can provide that for you or send you one from the extension office. We finally get to everyone's favorite part, harvest. The challenge is always, can you, pick any of them that actually make it back into your house, or are you just going to eat them all out in the field? So with June bearing ones, harvest begins in May. The last two, it lasts about 2 to 3 weeks, and the heaviest of the harvest is the first 4 to 6 days. Berries ripen 28 to 30 days after you see those first blooms, so you can mark it down on your calendar and keep track. This can be slowed down by temperatures getting cooler, or can also speed up by if we have a really warm spring. And they're usually picked every other day. Sometimes people go out and pick them every single day. Just depends on how quickly they're ripening. And it also depends on the variety that you have as well. Everbearing crops usually come in June, midsummer to fall. They typically yield of the 3 crops during the season: a moderate crop in the spring, a summer crop of small berries because those temperatures have gotten a lot hotter, and then a heavier fall crop. Um, the total yields, though, for this going all season is still lower than those that we usually get from that May crop from those June bearing berries. And the fall crop for these guys all depends on having a cooler summer for obtaining good fruit size and yield. So when it comes to harvesting, pick when uniform in color, firm but beginning to ripen slightly. Harvest with the cap on. This means it will store better and last longer. Pinch rather than pull, because sometimes if you pull, you'll rip the whole cap off, or you can potentially rip the berry. They don't ripen anymore after harvest, so that's why when we see them in the store and they might have a little bit of white on them, they're always going to stay white. They're not going to ripen anymore once we pull them from the plant. So you want to leave them out there as long as you possibly can. A couple of things about post-harvest: you want to make sure to store them in a refrigerator, covered, unwashed, with the cap on. Don't overcrowd them. We try to, not pack them all in containers super tight, because they'll rub up against each other and cause bruising, and then they will decline in quality quicker. Use berries within 2 to 3 days. Strawberries are low in calories and high in nutrients, and 1 cup contains about 55 calories, unless you're turning them into jam, which freezer jam, and then that significantly goes up. But they're a great source of vitamin C, also contain vitamin A, iron, fiber, and folic acid. Okay, so we've made it through our season. We've harvested, we've enjoyed our berries, we've made jam so we can enjoy them throughout the year, or we froze them and so we have them as a healthier option. So there's a few things to do after harvest when you have the matted row system. So we want to mow off the old foliage. We want to do an inch to a half inches above the crown of the plant. We don't want to hit that crown, though, because that will end up killing our plant. We want to narrow the rows to 6 to 12 inches wide. It seems like, we're destroying our plants, but actually this is gonna, reinvigorate them, rejuvenate them to produce more runners, and hopefully we'll have a better crop the next year. We can remove weeds. We want to remove weeds as we can. We have a variety of different herbicides that can actually be applied in between the rows or over top the plants. If you need more information on those, you can give us a call at the office and I'd be happy to provide those for you. You could thin out plants so there's only 4 to 6 inches between each plant. And then we want to make sure that we irrigate. This is important, as I've mentioned before, that this will help to set up healthy plants for the next growing year. Other ways to grow strawberries in your backyard if you don't have space for matted rows or a piece of land to put some strawberries on is growing them in a strawberry pot. A lot of times I see these being used more for hens and chicks, but you can grow strawberries in them. Strawberries are shallow rooted, so we want to keep in mind that we're gonna have to make sure to water these guys quite a bit. Traditionally we see using the Everbearing or day neutral ones, and those are going to be the ones that we often see in hanging baskets that are sold in garden centers as well. And just some couple other ideas for growing strawberries. These are most likely all going to be those ever-bearing ones or day neutral ones, the ones especially in the bag that you see there or the hanging basket. There's a strawberry towers that you can build and plant in, or a raised bed. I have June-bearing strawberries in a raised bed at home and they are doing pretty well. So that's another option for you when it comes to growing strawberries at home. All right, that wraps up our lesson on growing strawberries in your own backyard. I wanted to tell you all thank you for taking the time to watch this PowerPoint today, and hopefully it was informative. If you have any additional questions, you can give us a call at the Mercer County Extension Office at 859-734-4378, or you can send me an email at jessica.besson@uky.edu. Thank you.